All right, good evening and welcome to the May 21st meeting of the Norfolk Public School Committee. As we begin all meetings, we'll start by reading our mission statement. The Norfolk Public Schools offers a safe, joyful, and challenging learning environment that meets the needs of our diverse students. Through school, family, and community partnerships, we provide an education that inspires lifelong learners and cultivates caring and productive citizens of our ever-changing world. We'll start with roll call.
Miriam Goodman, Business Consultant.
Victoria Slovan, Assistant Superintendent.
Peter Schwalbe, School Committee.
Just Lauren Vivas.
Grace Lockhead.
Lisa Sheldon.
Medora Champagne.
Ingrid Olardi. And we have Adrian Smith here with us. So per school committee policy, at the first meeting following the election, the school committee has to reorganize. So the first item is to select and elect a new school committee chairman. So at this time, I open the floor for nominations for a new chair.
Sure. I just based on kind of some feedback from the select board and how they do things, as much as I've appreciated Medora's leadership these past years. I know the select board changes every year or two just to move things around, and I've spoken to Lisa. She has some great ideas, so I'd like to nominate Lisa Sheldon for chair.
Second?
I'll second that.
Any other nominations?
I'll nominate Medora Champagne. Do we have to have two separate motions, just from a procedural standpoint?
We probably should vote on the first motion, then vote on the second. So, yep, okay, so we will
Well, I don't think you can vote. I mean, well, yeah, we'll see how it goes. So,
Right.
yeah, so it would just be discussion on the first motion?
Okay.
Okay. Just so we're procedurally.
So we'll proceed with discussion, questions, comments on the first motion to nominate Lisa Sheldon as the new chair. Comments, questions?
So I would like to ask a question. So I think, totally agree. Wonderful. But I think my personal feeling is, given the environment that we're going into right now, which is, a little bit tense with what's going on in the town, and we have people in the audience for the first time maybe ever other than budget and the equity audit, which is wonderful, but says something about the tenor. And my concern with changing now is that I think it would be good to have somebody who has experience in the role to kind of, corral the conversation if needed. It just feels like wouldn't be the kindest entry as a new chair. That would be my feedback.
No, I mean, I understand the situation and kind of the environment we're in. I guess my kind of point still stands that I feel like reorganization is good and it's healthy for the committee to move things around. I do have my full trust in Lisa that she can handle the task at hand. We have talked a little bit about not just reorganization of the committee, but some things that we can do as a committee in terms of like the agenda style and the way that things are presented to engage the community more. And I feel like over like even the next months and the next year, like community engagement and the way that we interact in that point is going to be so big going forward.
What do you mean by community engagement? Like, how do you see things changing?
So just the structure of the meetings being one point. Another point that Lisa has mentioned, kind of putting things together after the meeting, and some feedback from the community that we've had is that certain points in the meeting are hard to follow or to find if somebody's not at the meeting and wants to review the video and recap. So I think just drawing up maybe a newsletter, there's some ideas she's been throwing around in regards to making it easier for those in the community to find the points and find kind of the exhibits that they're looking for, and just making it easier for them to pinpoint those and ask questions.
I mean, all respect to Medora, wonderful committee chair. The reason I second it is because change is good. It's healthy. 2 years, I think you've supported. I think it's good to have a rotating position for chair. I don't think we should make the decision out of fear for the current environment. We're all equals on this board, on this committee, and I think, you know, I think that it would be a nice way to start a new season to have a new chair on the board. And I think it's a great idea.
I think, as someone who's involved, is the topic of what this conversation, I think that those are all very valid points. I think that prior to being the chair, I served as the vice chair for a period of time, and I had a chair that had been chair for 9 years, mentoring me as vice chair to prepare me to take on that position. So it is not my goal to be on this committee and, well, I would not be able to match Thomas's tenure as chair, but it is not my goal to be on this committee and be the chair for the remainder of the time frame. Given the relative newness of this committee group altogether, my preference probably would have been to remain as chair for an additional year, and I 100% would have welcomed a change after that fact. I would support Lisa in the role of vice chair. I think she would be fantastic. I think she would make a good chair. I think that each member has the same degree of power, so being the chair comes with just additional responsibility. I do think that having navigated interactions with the state during the course of the pandemic might give me some perspective on what we're about to jump into. So that's what I would offer.
Should I go? I think everyone on this board could actually do a phenomenal job at chair. I think everyone brings unique talents. So I would have confidence in anyone doing it. It is something I would enjoy doing. I've enjoyed engaging with different community members, hearing different perspectives. I've learned a lot over my past 2 years here. And do you have ideas about, getting more community engagement and getting different groups involved? But I also respect the committee's decision too. I think, like I said, anyone here is qualified to do it. Anyone here we have a very strong administration too to ask for guidance, and we all know other avenues where to go to ask for guidance. So I'm happy with whatever majority decides, but it's something I would welcome doing.
And just to add on top of that, Lisa is up for re-election, and as much as I hope the community would support her, we never know the battle ahead, so I think it would be nice.
I think that's a very good point as well. And we all bring different strengths and expertise, and none of us are less qualified to run that role. We're all equals on this board.
Well,
I think we should give Lisa the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, we are all equals, but I do think that experience on the board does give, I think, I don't want to speak for Lauren, but I would say, for myself, only being on the committee for 1 year, I would not feel comfortable being chair. I'm sure I could do it, but, I think some time in the seat and, observing and listening and learning is healthy and good. So just a point.
Well, I think that's why Lisa makes a good candidate. She's been on the committee for 2 years, and I think she probably brings some good ideas, and we should be open to making a change.
I don't think that there's an aversion to change. I think that it's just a dialogue around what the best fit at the present time would be. As I said, I have no designs on remaining chair and was happy with the chair that we had, and frankly, the thought didn't occur to me before Thomas left the board, just because we were neck deep in a global pandemic and a lot of state engagement that he had been heavily involved in. That felt that it would have been disruptive to kind of shift him out of that role. I know the select board rotates. They have a standing policy, I think, that whomever is up for re-election is essentially automatically the chair. We don't have, that hasn't historically been a school committee policy, so I don't think it's an aversion to change. It's just, it's always open for discussion. I don't know that tying it to re-election is necessarily healthy.
No,
But I mean, that's just my opinion.
No, I wasn't tied to that. It's just a matter of, you said you would support her in the future as chair, so I said that just opportunity might not.
Well, I'm very much hoping she runs for re-election.
That's why I said I hope the community will support her, but we don't know, the fight ahead or what, the tides will bring.
Yeah, like I said, I think anyone on this board could do it, even in this time. I think we're a very collaborative board. We're a very civil board. We bring various opinions, but we all are civil, and we all get along, and we all support each other. So I respect what everyone wants to do, but I do think that everyone here is qualified to do it. I understand the concerns. I think when you get into any position that's a year, you never know what the year will bring. So you could have a brand new chair and things could go crazy that year. You just never know. But those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think my hesitation is that we already know, right? We already know what we're going into. And that, I think it's scary for a lot of the community, and we are all community members, right? And so that would be my only.
I don't see the logic in that. I don't think we need to be using fear as a reason to not make a change.
I don't think it's fear. I think it's more.
You just said it's scary. So the change of chair, we're relating the change of chair to scariness of the community being scared right now.
Well,
And
I'll
I
let
don't
Grace
think
speak
that
for
the
herself
change
too.
in the
I
chair
apologize
will
for
cause
putting words.
the earth to shatter underneath our community. So
I guess allow me to correct what I meant, and I thought it was kind of obvious, but no, I mean, we are going into a time, unlike the past year, as I said before, we had nobody in the audience. You know, we're not like a terribly sexy committee where people want to come and hear us, talk about, people come for important topics, but we usually don't have people in the audience. I think the people in the audience now show that there's more community engagement. I think we're going to have more community involvement just at open meeting, in points of order, the way that meetings are run. And that is because of what is going on. That is, and okay, you can use the word fear, you can use the word engagement, you can use whatever, but the community is here. And so to me, my hesitation would be having somebody without the experience in this time would give me pause. It has nothing to do with, anything other than I think it's really healthy to have some time and some experience in your belt. But
I understand.
how do you get the experience if you're not afforded the opportunity?
You serve as vice chair the way that I did.
chair.
I mean, and that is what I did, which gives you an opportunity to consistently run meetings if someone is not there, gives you an opportunity to collaborate with the chair as far as how agendas are set and what is and isn't permissible from the standpoint of what you are putting on the agenda and how it's going to be treated with respect to action items. It gives you a chance to brush up on your Robert's Rules of Order, which is hence the single motion versus two motions all at once in a free-for-all of conversation. So there is some value in the experience. Ultimately, my goal would be to see someone else in the role at some point during the next 3 years, ideally within a year. That's my personal position as someone who went through the process that way. So that's my lived experience, that's my perspective, that is how I found myself very comfortable and able to step into the role. But certainly, having to do the job is a great teacher in and of itself. So.
No, I was just,
If there's further questions, we can take them, but otherwise we can move forward with the vote.
okay, I was just going to make a comment.
If you have another comment, go ahead.
No, I don't have a question. I was just going to say that, I know that we're all individually capable and, probably would be confident in the role, and I'm sure Medora has gone out of her way to do this too. Just from a personal standpoint, I've seen, Lisa in the past, even since I've been on, she's been a great mentor to me and going out of her way and taking a lot of time and effort, to engage with different community members, different important stakeholders in the community, as well as lots of conversations out of her way with Ingrid. And I know we all do that. It's just a point that I wanted to make, that we're all kind of all equally there and have the experience. So that was really it.
So if there's no further discussion, then we would move forward the vote on the proposal, which is a nomination for Elisa Sheldon to serve as the next chair. So we would be looking for a vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
Can I vote for myself?
You can.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed?
Nay.
I'm going to abstain,
Okay.
since I was part of the topic of the conversation.
Okay. So then Lisa would take over as the school committee chair. So I'm going to pass you the gavel, and you will take motions for the remaining items.
Right. So now we have to nominate a vice chair. Does anyone have interest in the vice chair position?
Certainly.
I
happy to
nominate
do it.
Fedora Champagne for vice chair.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I think
Or
technically
discussion.
you're supposed to call for
Discussion.
discussion.
Oh,
okay.
was this
Do you have any? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody against?
Aye.
Everybody has to vote one way or the other or abstain. Yeah.
I'm not done. I'm just making my check mark.
Oh, no, I was talking to, I'm sorry, Ingrid
Okay.
seemed
Any
perplexed.
opposed? Any abstentions? We have to nominate a secretary. And Adrian, will you hang out with us for another year? Sounds like an interesting one.
Perfect.
Can I nominate Adrian as secretary again for us this year?
I'll second. Or did you need a nomination? Did you nominate?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And no abstentions?
Thank you, Adrian.
Then we need a KP representative. So this is a member of the school committee who goes to all the KP meetings, and they are also a voting member on KP. Does anyone have any interest in serving on the KP?
Personally, I cannot, since I'm doing 2 nights a week, or 2 nights a month in addition to this on the building subcommittee.
Yeah, I'm in that boat as well. I would have been interested, but it's too much.
That's a lot. I didn't know you guys meant
At least.
to.
Likewise.
Either of you have.
I'll nominate Lisa.
What days are the meetings? Do you know what days KP meet?
They're usually Mondays and they meet
Mondays.
twice a month.
Okay, if I do that, I think I'm good. Everyone else can?
That
We
sounds
can't
fair.
nominate you for everything else?
No, thank you.
Not gonna happen.
Just kidding. Okay, if someone wants to
Yeah.
nominate me, I guess.
Please, go ahead and do that.
Was that a motion? So should we second? So, Peter, you made the motion?
I did.
Okay, I'll second.
Any discussion?
Are you sure?
What? No, not really, but someone's got to do it, right? Monday's the only night I actually can do, but. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Go for it.
And then the legislative liaison, this is to mask.
That is one position, KP.
Okay.
rep.
Didn't we have like a mask representative, though, that we voted on?
We did in the past, and we will have to probably in the June meeting
Okay.
nominate someone. for
Okay,
that.
perfect.
But we do have 2 remaining subcommittees. Generally, those are volunteer. We have the budget subcommittee, which we'll need 2 members for, and then policy, 2 members. Typically, the policy committee has met prior to school committee meetings. Budget has met after. Budget generally runs from October ongoing through town meeting. We'll be meeting this summer. The policy meetings are generally 45 minutes prior to the school committee during the course of the school committee year, September through June.
So do I just volunteer? Oh, sorry.
sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
So given just the amount of work that goes into the building committee, I would ask to stay on policy.
Same.
Because this is going to be a crazy budget year and I'm not going to have, I don't have the time, yeah.
We also kind of talked about maybe switching the 2 times. I don't know.
Yeah, once we elect a group, you can elect a different meeting night. It's just, this is what's been in the past. Most committee members, for childcare reasons, prefer, or for other business, it's easier to be out one night and to do a longer night, but we're
Yeah.
open to changing that if that's...
Okay. Personally, I would love to jump on policy committee. I did budget this year. I'd love to get some experience on the other side. I think we have several important things coming up this year that I'd love to kind of be involved in, at least that I assume is coming up this year. So that's just
I would really prefer to stay on the policy committee again, just from a time management standpoint. We're meeting, I think, in the go forward probably twice a month for the building committee because we're getting to the point of pricing and estimating. I cannot with confidence say that I'm going to have the time to commit to having been on the budget subcommittee a number of years in the past, including very hairy budget years, and knowing what that involves. I don't feel confident that I would be able to provide the level of time and attention that it would need. I would prefer to be on policy just because it is more of it is not less important.
lighter lift.
But it is a more malleable thing from a time frame standpoint and from an urgency standpoint.
It also may be good to have some consistency on budget, just given how, we had to use the one-time funds and you were there for that and couldn't bring that experience. Talking a lot about experience.
Again, just for
I
the
haven't
picture for the
spoken
school
yet on
committee,
this.
that any decisions made by the budget committee or policy committee come to the full committee for vote. So there is discussion. So regardless of which committee you are on, you do have a voice in either budget or policy matters.
So like in regards to policy, like any changes or any proposals to
Come
like
to the
new-
full committee
They
for
always
vote.
do, and
Yep.
and you guys can't block it from coming to the full committee kind of thing, or?
What do you mean block it?
I don't know, like any changes, if somebody proposed like a change, it can't, and then it,
The policy subcommittee reviews policy. We review changes to legal guidelines. Any school committee member could ask the policy committee to review a policy, and they would come to the full committee with recommendations. But if you disagree with the recommendations, that's a conversation for the full committee.
And the subcommittee is not a quorum, so
Right.
Yeah,
as you
I know.
know, I mean, so
they
there's
can't
no.
vote. So yes, if you request review of a policy, the policy committee would do that. They would come with the recommendations, and the discussion would be at the full committee from there.
And as we have historically done, that would involve consultation with outside counsel.
Yep.
okay. So like if a policy was proposed, I'm just thinking
Yep.
kind of vaguely, because I don't mind doing budget, and I am sensitive to the fact that you guys, have a lot on your plate. I don't want to, take on the lighter burden when you guys are already full. I'm just thinking like if there was a policy change or what am I thinking, policy proposed, it would always move to the full committee for like discussion and voting on, or?
If a committee member requested it, sometimes we review policies because there's changes to the law, and when we review it, our policy covers that, and it's not substantial changes, and it doesn't need to be revised or updated. So the committee might say our current policy is consistent with the law, doesn't require revision. But if a committee member said, I want to review and discuss this policy, it could be put on the agenda. Policy subcommittee could come with recommendations, and then it could be discussed. Any changes to any policy go through 3 readings of the committee if it's a major change. So each time the committee reviews that policy, you can have questions and make recommendations to that, and then the school committee has the final vote. Incidental changes, if it's just language changes or minor changes, still get voted on by the full committee, but they can be in a single meeting.
Okay, and if I weren't on policy, I can like look at a policy or something that's being proposed and like talk
Ask
to
the
them
committee to
individually
review
and
it and
say,
come
hey,
back.
like these are some changes I'd like to see, and like you guys can obviously discuss it and say yes or no, but then it would come to the full committee.
A report would come to the full committee and the
Okay.
policy subcommittee. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and historically, again, and not to beat a dead horse, that overwhelmingly, I mean, we may have we're talking about a hypothetical, right? So
Yeah, I just have
but, like,
one thing
it
in
would-
mind that I think is coming up this year, and I can talk to you.
And so that would overwhelmingly, if it was a change to an existing policy or a proposed new policy,
Yeah.
typically involve, I mean, we would have our own thought process and our understanding of what the policy was or what the policy change was, and discuss that in subcommittee. But those decisions are not made autonomously by the policy subcommittee. Those are made with heavy engagement with outside counsel
Yeah.
for legality, and then also with consultation with MASC,
Okay.
where
And
No,
that's
I
way
wouldn't draw
con-
something
yeah.
out of nowhere
Yeah.
or something. It was more just, I didn't know if you guys could like, as 2 people, I know you're not a quorum there, could like review a committee and then decide just to scrap it and not bring it, or if somebody said like, hey, this is something I'd like to talk about in the full committee, you guys discuss it and then say, no, we're not going to bring it to the full committee kind of thing, or no?
Well, and I think we also give updates, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think that
So
would
you
also
could
be a place
discuss
for
the updates
discussion.
on-
Because
yeah.
we'd have to say, this was brought to us and it
Yeah.
was discussed, and, this is what we thought, and then that would be a discussion that we would all have, I think.
Okay.
which is what, I mean, I think we did have one instance where
Yeah.
this occurred last fall, and that
Yeah.
was precisely the process that we followed, so the same process would be followed if
Come to the
the
full
same
committee.
situation arose again.
Yeah.
Essentially, so I don't, there's no, I mean, and minutes are kept of the
And budget
subcommittee
committee is the
meetings, so
same way. So budget committee comes up with a recommendation for the full committee, but you can't, as the budget subcommittee, vote on this is how the budget goes forward. It comes back to the full committee for discussion. So the subcommittees review issues, they make recommendations, and those come, if there's
Yeah.
a vote required, to the full committee.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar with like obviously how budget works. I just haven't worked on the policy side, so I didn't know if it fluctuated a little bit.
Same process.
Okay.
Well, I'm happy to jump into the budget committee with Grace if that helps solve.
Well, no, because it's the time commitment with the,
Grace can't do budget.
Yeah, we're requesting not to do budget.
So are Lauren and Peter, are you okay doing budget?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you two both on policy. So this doesn't say a vote next to it, so these are just agreed upon?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, moving on. We have no one signed up for public comment tonight. Did anyone want to speak? And then correspondence, we don't have any correspondence. I did want to make a clarifying comment on the correspondence because two people asked me. If you email us, we don't automatically read your emails to the public. We will specifically ask you, and then only if you say yes do we read it. So I just want to make sure no one was concerned about that because those were two questions I got. Moving on to the school committee chair report. Peter, welcome in this
Thank you.
time. Sure, this is just what you pictured. We're happy to have you here, though.
Thank you.
Looking forward to working with you. If you want to tell people just really quickly about yourself.
My
Introduce
name is
yourself.
Peter Schwalbe. I've been living in Norfolk with my family about nearly 10 years, and excited to join the team here and looking forward to it.
Moving on to the gift fund, we have some things to vote on. We have some very generous gifts from the Norfolk PTO. We have some teacher grants at HOD. We have the Bajorum, speech sound cues big box, how to hug chairs, video modeling kits, trifold boards, art supplies, aperture strategies, speech and smile story objects, E. Horton Boom Learning subscription, and E. Horton Seesaw subscription, and then a Museum of Science grant and second grade t-shirts. So can I have a motion to approve all these gifts from the PTO?
So moved.
Oh,
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
no.
Thank you. Thank you to the PTO.
Thank you.
Yes, PTO members in the audience, thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I will turn it over to the superintendent report.
All right, we have a lot on the agenda tonight, so I'll try to be efficient and comprehensive. So the first item on the agenda is to provide an update to the committee on what information we have so far and what we know about the state plan for the Bay State Correctional Temporary Safety Net site. So I'm going to kind of review some of this you may already be aware of, but I just, for the public, want to kind of update what we know so far. So we received notification on the Friday night around 5:30 before the 6 o'clock news announced that the state made the decision to transition the Bay State Correctional Center into a temporary emergency shelter for families. The decision is not a local decision. It is a state decision. It's a state facility. What we do know is at the time that they shared the information with us, they are anticipating this site will be operational for 6 to 12 months and has the capacity to serve 140 to 150 families. There are some provisions. Because of the location and the lack of immediate access to hospitals and medical care, the state is screening families, students with significant medical issues or families with significant medical issues will not be placed in this site. Women in their last trimester of pregnancy will also not be placed at this site. So those are some of the things that the state is looking at. We don't have detail on where the students are arriving from. There may be some families that are unsheltered Massachusetts families that are being placed in this shelter. It may be students that are newcomers. We don't have the detail on that yet, and we don't have the detail on the number of families that or number of students that we are expecting. What we do know also, and I did send a letter out to the community last week, we do know, as this committee is well aware, we do have a space shortage at H. Holiday. Our preschool is at capacity, and we have a wait list. We have about 70 Norfolk families on the wait list for preschool. Any students that are preschool age that arrive at the shelter are to be treated as their peers are who reside in Norfolk and would be added to the wait list, but we will not be able to bring preschool age students into the school system. Obviously, there's a critical need for young children for early childhood care, so we have been in communication with the state about what could be provided through the state, but we won't be able to house and accommodate preschool students. They would have to follow the appropriate waitlist process. We do expect that, according to the state, the average length of time families are in temporary shelters is 45 to 60 days. That's obviously an average, which means some students may be there for 3 weeks, some students may be there for 6 months. The goal of the temporary site is to work with families to access and to transition to more permanent shelter. The one benefit that I would say that we will have, that some of the local communities that are currently educating students from migrant families did not have, is that the state will be assigning a 24/7 provider who will be working at the site and serving as a case manager to work with individual families. That person will take a lot of the responsibilities that schools in this region have taken in the past, which will be supporting registration of new students, supporting students in registering for mass health and getting access to health care, coordinating employment services for families. The site is intending to offer some courses and some employment-related courses, so technology courses for families, employment services on site. The state will be providing meals, 3 meals a day for all families residing there. They also, in the state contract that they are issuing, will be hiring 24/7 security through a private security firm that will enforce the state curfew that is imposed for these shelters. They will also be managing transportation for families to medical appointments, to job interviews, to local transportation services, MBTA, things like that. School will be providing transportations for students to the school district. Under federal law and state law, students have a right to immediately enroll without undue delay into the public school in this town or city they're residing in. And because the shelter is in Norfolk, those students have the right to immediate enrollment in Norfolk. We are in the process of gathering more information. There is currently, we know what the state has been providing for funding. There's multiple different sources. So currently, in terms of immediate funding, districts can apply for grant funding for up to $1,000 per child for immediate costs. So curriculum materials, clothing, technology equipment, any kinds of immediate. It can be applied to some staffing needs, so that's immediate funding. I've talked to several other superintendents who've been involved in this work, and that funding does arrive very quickly from the state. Then currently there is a reimbursement of $104 a day per student. That is based on the average tuition or state per pupil spending. So we talk a lot in budget about what the average per pupil spend is. At the state level, it's $18,000 and change. You divide that by 180 days and you get the individual day cost. So for each student, it would be $104 a day. That is a reimbursement, and it is structured to be payments issued to districts on a quarterly basis. I have talked to both KP and Plainville, who have quite a few students this year. They have received their payments. They have received 2 of the 3 payments. Theirs was split into 3 parts. They're waiting for the final payment. Just so people know, that $104 a day reimbursement is part of the supplementary budget. It was not part of the original budget. So at the state level, when critical needs arise, they can pass a supplementary budget. The timeline is different. So that funding is approved through December, the end of December, and then we are in the process of advocating with the state and working with the state legislature to expand and continue funding. The district can determine how to best use that funding and in order to support the enrollment of our students. At this time, what our plans are, the state heavily regulates instruction for students that are English language learners. There's very comprehensive guidelines that are research-based. I have copies if anybody wants to read them. There are about 50 pages of requirements for ELL instruction, and the state is transitioning that name. We're now referring to students as multi-language learners or multilingual learners. Just to be, again, just for context, the population of students that are second language learners in Norfolk has continued to grow. Over the past, when I first came here in 2013, we didn't have any students that were identified as ELL. We currently have about 35 students. This year, we have approximately 12 students who are non-English speakers, who do not have any English, who've come from a variety of places and are residing in Norfolk. So many of our teachers have experience working with students that don't speak English. As part of the state licensure requirement, our teachers are required to take a 30-hour course called in Sheltered English Immersion, which provides them with resources and strategies to support the English language acquisition of students in their classrooms. That's a requirement. If you have any EL students in your class, or that you complete that within a certain period of time. Most of our teachers have completed the Sheltered English Immersion, and they're also required every recertification cycle to take an additional 15 PDPs in SEI or Sheltered English Immersion to prepare them to support these students. What the new guidelines call for, and I'll be working very closely with the state, with the town government, with the school committee, and for those of you who just signed up for the budget committee, to best allocate those funds in a way that will support our ability to meet the needs of our new learners and also make sure that we retain strong educational programs that meet the needs of all of our students. The new state guidelines recommend that districts consider putting into place newcomer classrooms. We will be looking at this model at both buildings, which would mean that you would have a classroom that is staffed by a classroom teacher and probably co-taught for a good portion of the day by an L certified teacher, where students that are registered with us through the Bay State site would come and spend the majority of their initial days in a substantially separate classroom where we can evaluate and assess their language proficiency levels, where we can support transition services, help orient students to the district. Students would be placed on a general homeroom list, and as they are ready would be transitioned to spend some time in an inclusion setting where they will also be able to develop their language skills by being immersed in rich language environments. All of those students, depending on their English proficiency level, will have pull-out instruction, targeted instruction in English learning. Depending, we have assessments that we've used for probably a decade. Based on those results, if students have no English skills, they receive a lot more directed instruction out of the classroom to help them acquire that English language skills. What we have heard from neighboring communities is many of the students arriving do have some English. Some are more proficient than others. Some have been in the country for a while in different places waiting for shelter. Some have traveled different journeys to arrive here. So in talking with both Plainville and KP, they saw through they're both servicing students that are currently housed in hotels, that a wider range of language skills coming in. So we would be looking at transitional classrooms, one at each. They would be multi-age classrooms. Whatever we determine is going to be the best model, we do have to have approved by the state if we're offering a different model of providing English language instruction. Because our population in the past has been so small, we have not had transition classrooms, but we do, as I said, have about 12 students across the grade levels and across the buildings. And in anticipation of having more students arriving needing that service, I think having a newcomer classroom at each building makes a lot of sense. We will be advertising anticipated vacancies so that we can begin the process of searching for licensed qualified teachers to lead these classrooms, as well as an additional English language certified teacher. We also will be considering other areas of anticipated need, such as when we met in Plainville, they have a family liaison coordinator that provides some communication and continuity in planning between the shelter and the schools. So that might be something that we consider in terms of mental health needs. Vaccinations has been a question. So in terms of general regulations, students are required to be vaccinated against certain common diseases in Massachusetts. There are exceptions. So students can file a religious exemption or they can file a medical exemption. We have students housed in our schools currently that are eligible for those exemptions. So that's under state and federal law. What the sites are doing is bringing in mobile clinics and providing vaccinations. Under the McKinney-Vento Federal Homeless Act, We are not allowed to prevent immediate enrollment or cause delays in enrollment while we await receipt of records, medical records, or vaccination records. Many of these students have missed significant amounts of schooling, and the priority is to get them into schools as quickly as possible. Many other districts, when hotels have been assigned as designated spaces for migrant families, have had the requirement of getting students in immediately. For us, because students are coming at the end of the year, there will be a 2-month gap, and a priority of the state is to bring in vaccination clinics and get students vaccinated. Homeless students through McKinney-Vento are not exempt from vaccination. As the homeless liaison for the district, I have to work with our school physician, I have to work with the site coordinators to make sure that we are getting students vaccinated. So it is not a permanent exemption, we just can't delay the start of their enrollment to school. An important thing, just to again clarify for the public, the current federal law as far as exemptions to vaccinations, the majority of our students have protection against the diseases they've been vaccinated for. The federal regulations and the state regulations, if we have an outbreak of chickenpox or we have a case of chickenpox, any child with an exemption, whether it's religious or medical, is excluded from school because they are the students that are susceptible and considered vulnerable. And the State Department of Public Health has very clear guidelines for the length of that exclusion from school. So any new students would be treated exactly the way we've treated all of our other students who have exemptions moving forward. But the priority is to get students vaccinated, get them connected with healthcare, and get them connected with medical care as well. I think there's probably questions the committee has. Tried to share sort of what we know. Happy to take questions or explain any things that people have further. I do want to just clarify, this is an evolving situation. We are learning more. We are, at this point, our focus is on planning and making sure that we are developing plans that are going to really support all of our students and children. We are not the decision-making body, so we are not focused on, you know, the outside political beliefs, the disagreements with state policy. We are focused on planning to be ready for the students that we have coming, because that's what we have authority and governance over.
So one of my big concerns that kind of sticks out to me, apart from other concerns, is the transient nature of the facility, and that we're funded by the state per child per day. So if we have 100 kids come in and we're being funded by the state for that amount, and then 45 days later 50 kids leave, and now our budget's cut in half of what we're funded from the state, that support staff that we had to hire, do we need to go and let them go, and then 45 days later we rehire, and it's just like a revolving cycle that with no stability, or how do we?
So I think that's an excellent question, and again, we don't know exactly the population, so we are developing preliminary plans. We are going to post and start interviewing for anticipated vacancies. We do expect that come probably early July, mid-July, we'll have a better sense of the numbers of students. The state funding of $100 a day, and again, that is approved in the current budget through December, being considered in the future supplemental budget. When you think about that, if we have an average of just 10 students, if we assume a very low impact, that's $180,000 over the course of the year for the district, which will fund the majority, which would fund 3 positions. Mm-hmm. So the district is going to have to do some careful planning. I think we are not going to overspend. I will recommend working with the budget subcommittee to consider we may want to delay filling some open positions that we have that aren't critical for start of school year until we have more information. But what we're looking at is hiring general educators for these 2 newcomer classrooms. We have open positions for paraprofessionals throughout the year. If we needed to temporarily reassign staff, we could do that to fill open vacancies, to fill a maternity leave that was unexpected. But I would say, as we are planning moving forward with the budget subcommittee, we'll be conservative when we estimate what we'll get for revenue, but it should be sufficient to fund multiple positions. I mean, 10 students is a very conservative estimate. If you have 30 students, you're talking $350,000. So the funding that we would be receiving from the state should be sufficient to fund these positions plus additional services. I would recommend to the Budget Subcommittee and to the full committee that we fund essential critical positions to support programming, and that we wait till we have further information to consider adding additional support to reading specialists or additional math support. I do expect that there'll be funding for those things, but I think we have to be cautious in how we staff up. But we will need to have staff for these critical classrooms, as well as a support staff for an additional L teacher, as well as potentially mental health support. So I would recommend that. Again, conservative on the estimate, what we think we'll receive. But I do know that many, many districts are carrying funds over because they didn't expend all of the resources that were provided through the state into the next fiscal year. So I do expect that we will be that we will have sufficient funds to appropriately staff.
Okay. I mean, I hope that's the case. I'm curious to see how it plays off on like the supplementary budget. My fear again is just that like we have a whole influx. Let's say we have 70, 80 at the beginning, and then 45 days later, most of them leave. Like, is that going to potentially cut into our actual budget when we have to continue to fund and pay for the salaries of these teachers that are no longer needed because the transient nature, again, we don't have really these peer districts to kind of bounce this off of because they're in and out, and we don't know tomorrow how many kids are going to leave and how many could come in. And so we have 50 kids who've left now for 6 months, but then all of a sudden we get a whole bunch more. It just seems like a planning nightmare. And so I hope, as we go through the budget lines and stuff, things make sense and we don't end up actually cutting into our general budget, which is already kind of in a really
I don't expect that will be the case, again, because I think the funding more than supports the staffing needs, at least as it's currently structured. But I do think there are, managing the budget, the budget is a plan. We've had certainly years where on it we've had to add a classroom, we've had to change, we have unexpected costs. We would have to work together as a school committee and as a team to say, all right, this is shifting, maybe we don't fill the building substitute positions and we move teachers into those positions, or we restructure, or we've had, currently we have 3 open positions for paraprofessionals. We staff differently, or we reallocate existing staff. So I think there's a lot of different ways we could manage it, but it will have to be closely managed, Lauren. I think you're right on that. We also, I should have said, we're also looking into there are other supplementary grants that are available. Vicki reached out to the Department of Ed today. They are offering a McKinney-Bento grant that, depending on your enrollment and the number of students you're serving, it can provide up to $20,000 for summer programming. So we are also considering, we did talk to the state, they said we would be potentially eligible for this funding. We're also thinking about a transition to school, a bridge to school summer program, where we would be able to provide half-day instruction to students that as they arrive, to help orient them to the building, to school policies, to get to go through the cafeteria, see the gymnasium, and meet some of our teachers. And we, through that, could also do some preliminary assessment and help that could help us with placement. So there are a lot of other supplementary grants that are out there that we would actively pursue.
Yeah, I'd love to see.
They said today that we were on their short list, so like anything.
Okay.
Well, we should be.
Right.
I think so.
So like, I think that it's going to open up opportunities for us to write a lot more grants too, because we'll qualify. And also, there's quite a wait list too for families. So I think that
We're not going to have vacant rooms for very long.
No, I don't think vacants, but like you could have families move in who have like really small kids who
Right.
aren't obviously school age versus like filtering out. So I do hope like we can find grants that allow us to like retain the educators that we have to hire in the beginning rather than firing and then rehiring and like this whole continued cycle. I don't want to take up the whole time, but I was hoping you could kind of speak to how we're going to find the space for these newcomer classrooms, and if our estimates, and it's hard because again with the transient nature of the facility, like we could get estimates from the state tomorrow, but that number is going to be wildly different than what is actually happening in September when school starts. So again, from a planning perspective, like if we get double what we're expecting and we have these newcomer classrooms set up and then we need double the amount of newcomer classrooms, where are we going to pull that from, and what's the impact?
So as I said before, we have preliminary plans that will have to be subject to change, and I think that's a really valid concern. At the Freeman Kennedy, we currently have one open classroom that would be available that we could use. It's a curriculum planning room that could house one of the newcomer classrooms. At the H. Olive Day, initially when we developed the budget and we started out, we were expecting 8 kindergartens. We only have 7 coming in. That allowed us to plan to restore and have a music room. We may have to have music be back on a cart next year. It has been in the past, and that's a conversation that we'll have. I know the lovely music teacher offered the room up today and said, you know, if you knew my room, I would say I've been incredibly impressed and touched by how our staff have come forward to say, like, what can we do to help? How can we support this? So I think we have a really strong collaboration with the Norfolk Teachers Association and with our teachers, and we are planning to provide stipends for teachers to work over the summer as part of a planning committee so that we make sure multiple voices are heard in this plan. So we would have one space identified at each building. If we have to identify others, we'll have to be flexible and creative in terms of our space at the H. Olive Day. And, you know, again, these are preliminary. We would have to have further discussions. We do have a conference room that we use for team meetings. We might have to reallocate or relocate some office space in order to use some instructional spaces differently. Obviously, we've been working since 2017 to try to look at a building expansion project. So we would have to really be creative in terms of how we accommodate that. But we do have possibilities. Are they ideal long-term? No. But could we come up with short-term solutions? We would have to. And the same would be true at the Freeman Kennedy. We certainly have instructional spaces at both buildings for L learners right now that are pull-out spaces that we might kind of think about differently. So we would have to be creative in accommodating those space needs. But we do have a plan for at least one transitional classroom at each building.
Okay. How many children can be in these transitional, like the newcomer classrooms? My concern, or just like I kind of want to gauge how this would work, is if we get to the point where those rooms are too full, yep, and now we're putting, are we
have to advertise and hire additional staff and look at opening a second classroom.
Yeah, not just that, like, would they be added like full-time to the general classroom, in which we could be encroaching on our, you know, school committee policy classroom maximum?
So I think there's 2 questions that you have there, so let me know. I just want to make sure I answer them both. Yeah. So within the newcomer classrooms, we would want to keep class size consistent with all of our other policies. Mm-hmm. So at the lower grades, it's about 22. At the upper grades, it's 25. Those classrooms will be co-taught, so there'd be 2 teachers, probably a paraprofessional in those, so that students get more individualized services. So that would be what we look at for approximate class size, where we may have to add an additional classroom if numbers exceed that. Within the current school committee policy, which again, our maximum class size at the lower grades, K-2, is 22. We do have some open spots in every grade level. We're not at the maximum class size at any of those. It is tighter at the lower grades because we have a lower class size. So we have an average class size of 20. You don't have a lot of room, but we do have between 6 and 8 classrooms at every grade level. So there is less space available. At the upper grades, the class size policy is 25. So in some grades, we would have 35 spots or 27, like we looked at that earlier today. So there's much more capacity at the upper school. I've been very, very clear in messaging with the state about concerns about the numbers at the lower elementary, and we'll continue to talk with the state around that. As we learn more, but we do have some capacity within both buildings. If there was a year, a couple of years back, where we had to exceed the class size policy in kindergarten, that would be a vote of the school committee if we are going to exceed that. We did have a year, just because Norfolk enrollment is fluctuating a lot. There's years that we have 6 kindergartens, there's years that we have 8 kindergartens. So there was a year that the school committee voted to extend the policy, and we had class sizes of 23 in kindergarten, and simultaneously, they voted to put additional paraprofessional support for the academic areas in those classrooms that exceeded the class policies, so that we maintained low teacher-to-student ratios and that we could protect the academic integrity. So I think we have to be flexible, and we'll have to monitor it closely, but class size would not change or exceed the maximum without a vote of the school committee and without a plan for how we will meet the needs of those students.
Anyone else?
I have a number of questions
Okay.
that are a little more.
Sorry.
With respect to McKinney-Vento, as you've described it, students could theoretically be cycling in and cycling out within a 30 to 60 day time frame. Will the district be subject to the McKinney-Vento transportation requirements if they move elsewhere?
All right, so this is a little bit complicated, but McKinney-Vento is the Federal Homeless Act that requires districts to, it's an Educational Stability Act, so it's really for students that are homeless. If you are homeless and you relocate to another district, you have rights to be transported back at a cost to the original district so that your educational program is not disrupted. As far as the shelter site, what I have talked to many other districts about, first of all, the intent of the site is to support families in accessing more permanent housing through the state. So through the state programs, whether it's Section 8 housing or other apartment housing or finding jobs and relocating. If students are relocated to permanent housing, they are not covered by McKinney-Vento. They would not have any rights back to the district. They would be expected to immediately roll in the district where they are now residing. If students were moved from this shelter to another shelter, which is not the goal or intent of the shelters, but if that were to happen, they could potentially have rights to return to Norfolk. However, in talking with many other districts, that is not happening in practicality for many reasons. So, for example, if a student from Norfolk is relocated to a shelter in New Bedford, that family would have to send their child by transportation an hour back to Norfolk. In most of these shelters, families are pulling together to provide supports, so childcare, supervision, kids are very well connected. Many of these kids have been together for a long period of time. So I did talk to, again, our regional counterparts. Nobody has experienced students that are relocated to other shelters opting to come back. So I think it's highly unlikely. Is it legally possible? Absolutely. But I think the intent, again, is to find permanent housing, which makes students eligible, and in practicality, it's not really feasible for most situations.
And if they did choose to remain in Norfolk, it's only throughout the remainder of the school year, right? It doesn't filter over to other years?
It would depend. No,
okay.
It could filter over to other years. Where it ends is at the natural transition. So if they were second graders, they could complete second grade. But if there's a natural transition and they're going to have to transition to a new school, that would be the time that they would transition. And again, it is they're only eligible to the end of the school year in which they find permanent housing. So it would end if you are placed in a permanent situation.
And they could finish out.
I had another one too, just from not related to McKinney-Vento. For my own edification, so I understand what it is we're trying to do. The first part of my question is just for clarification. The recommendation for what is essentially a sub-separate classroom for newcomer students came from the state?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, the goal is to get students to provide supports to help students transition. Every student that came into a newcomer classroom will be assigned to a general grade level classroom. Okay. As we evaluate proficiency and their readiness, some of these students have had dramatic backgrounds. Once we have students are ready, they would be integrated so that they can be immersed in language-rich environments, supplement their English language learning. But depending on the proficiency level, they may have 2 to 3 hours of pull-out English instruction. And for anyone interested, there's, it shows you by proficiency level how much English language instruction is provided, what the appropriate models are. But yes, that recommendation is coming from the state.
Okay. And then dovetailing from that, I haven't read your 50-page packet. I will take it home with me, but perhaps you could answer this.
And we have, if anybody in the public, there's a link you can scan.
So I understand what it is that we're talking about implementing. For the L teachers who are coming in,
the curriculum that they're administering, does it require proficiency in the language of origin of the student, or is it designed to address any language skills that are coming in and bridge them to English?
It's designed to address a variety of languages. And actually, I have talked to our L teachers and have asked them to come to present to the school committee in a future meeting so that you can learn more about their program, how that operates, potentially some of our teaching staff who have worked with students that are non-English speakers in their classroom, because I figure you're going to have questions around what that actually looks like at the classroom level, so we can talk about scheduling that.
And then 2 more quick ones. Our current budget going into next year, does that allow for what I'm assuming may be an additional bus?
So that would also be something that we would have to utilize some of the state funding for.
Okay.
We would provide school transportation as, whereas the state site would provide transportation for families to grocery stores, local resources, appointments, things like that. So that we would have to spend a portion of the state funds to provide transportation to and from school.
And last, I think, hopefully easy question. Is the school district equipped to provide appropriate translation and communication for various languages?
Question. So the state does have translation.
Languages. So the languages that the families will be speaking, are we going to have the capacity to communicate with them?
Yeah. So the state does have a vendor that they are using, Fox Translation, am I correct, Vicki? And they are providing free translation services for all, in any language, for districts that are providing services and need the translations for students in shelters. So every year we translate our school handbook, all legal documents. We have a vendor that we use, but that's at cost for us if we have students coming in. Civil rights law requires us to provide documents in families' native language. So we have been doing the translations through Bay State. We have a program called Lexicate. We use Google Translate for classroom level documents, and teachers do a lot of that. But if we are serving students through a shelter, the state will provide professional translation services for all those documents at no cost.
Yeah. Today they mentioned they're going to give us some type of a device that will also help
Oh, yes,
us.
they did. Well, also teachers that are working with students will have a device that will provide verbal translation to support that communication too.
Can I ask a quick,
Yeah,
just
sorry, no,
piggybacking
I
on the
thought you were
homeroom?
sorry.
It was just a clarification
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the homeroom thing. So they'll have their separate,
Transition
homeroom.
classroom.
Transition classroom, and then they will each have a homeroom. When they come, day one,
Yep.
will they be introduced to that homeroom and to those?
Probably to the teacher in that homeroom,
Okay.
but I think we really
But then
have
you start
to.
a slow acclimation.
It depends, and I think it depends on individual students. As I said, some of these students are Massachusetts students that are unsheltered that have been in public school and are, so I would assume those students would start immediately
Would just
in
go right in.
classrooms.
Okay, that was my question.
This
They
is
were
a
all gonna be
newcomer
together.
classroom.
Okay.
Only for students that are newcomers to the country. Students in the shelter that are just relocated Massachusetts students will be placed in classrooms.
Okay,
They
perfect.
wouldn't be participating in this.
Yeah, there are many districts that have these type of models, so I think like with anything else, we'd probably be reaching out like we have been already, just to kind of see like how the models have been working, like what is the best structure for the students, you know what I mean, how we can best support them. So I think like as we kind of know more about our students and their individual needs, we'll be able to kind of plan out specifics, like what would the actual day look like, but I think like we'll share information as we have it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean,
Definitely makes
it was
sense,
worded poorly. It was
Right, no,
more
no,
like if I
I'm
have,
supporting
one of
what-
these
yeah.
students already speaks English, are they going to be put in this classroom
No,
and
they
not
would-
integrated right away? We would
Not
integrate them right
necessarily.
away.
And again, students have had different immigration experiences for the newcomers. So some students have been here for a while and have been in public school. So we're going to have to make case-by-case
Right.
decisions. The newcomer classroom is really intended to be a flexible classroom where students will have the opportunity to transition into the district and be integrated into general ed classrooms as quickly as possible, as long as it meets their needs. And again, pull-out instruction would be provided in the English language.
Part of that you said was assessment and helping them integrate and acclimate. Is there actual intensive language instruction happening in those classrooms
That's
as well?
what the L teachers would provide.
Okay.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
and that would be in that substantially separate program.
Do you know how quickly, since it's this database, their time to proficiency to be able to be placed into classrooms, how quickly? I imagine it's fairly quickly that they can.
Yeah, it is, and the goal of the programs is to support students in accessing the general curriculum as quickly as possible. But we have students that have come to us that have been non-English speakers with no language, who are functioning in integrated classrooms with push-in support and pull-out instruction support. We have a student who came to us a year ago with no English, who did a verbal PowerPoint in English for her class today. We have, students that are growing very quickly. So as you said, being immersed in the language of the classroom supports the English language instruction and does accelerate that proficiency.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the very short duration that they might be here, like 45 to 60 days, and how quickly we can get them proficient within that small window.
Yep. So there will be intensive instruction, and that is one of the benefits of getting kids into the schools as quickly as possible. Is regardless of where students are placed in the future, they will leave with some foundational skills that we are providing in those intensive settings.
Can I ask a few more questions?
Sure.
Since just on the vaccinations, I wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. So,
yep.
Our newcomers, we cannot prevent enrollment, correct? Are they required to be vaccinated?
Eventually, yes.
Okay.
So unless they qualify for a medical or religious exemption, like the current population. So yes, they will have to be vaccinated. The site is looking at mobile clinics. They're expediting that process. Again, because we have the whole summer, most students will have already been vaccinated through the summer program. New students, as they come in, once the site is set up, they will bring in or send out for appointments. And that is part of my role as the homeless liaison, is to support access to vaccinations and moving that forward.
Yeah, so how long in general do you anticipate a student theoretically could be in classroom with the general population unvaccinated?
I would expect a very short period of time, but no different than, again, we have students in all classrooms, or throughout the building that might have exemptions. So
right.
The state was thinking that most students will be vaccinated over the summer that are there at this point. Students that are coming in, it'll probably be a pretty short turnaround.
Are the existing pool of exemption parents notified of that as well?
I'm sorry, what do you mean? Do we notify?
Yeah, are existing students, some may have exemptions from vaccinations, due to health reasons.
Certainly. So if there were any, we're governed by the Department of Public Health. So if there were a chickenpox case, anybody with an exception would be notified and would need to be excluded from school.
So it's based on
yes.
outbreaks.
Yeah, if there is a known case. But I also think we, again, for our students that are medically fragile or have significant needs, we work very closely with the nurse and the parents to design programs that will support that. So we consider students' medical needs and planning for those students.
I had a couple curriculum questions. I'm assuming, and I'm making this assumption that, these kids that are coming in will kind of be the first time that a lot of our children are interacting with people from these types of backgrounds. Are we kind of reanalyzing or looking at our SEL curriculum and how we can prepare our current population to welcome them, and also emotionally understand that these kids might be here for a short period of time, make friends, say goodbye to your friends, and how to kind of emotionally deal with that transition? Your best friend comes in, even
No,
if
I
it's
think
only a
that's an
couple
excellent question, and I think part of the summer planning, and we've already had teachers ask, can we start sharing and gathering resources? So that'll be something that we certainly address and consider in planning, is how do we support students in understanding and being respectful and supportive of students that are entering the class and exiting the class. Mm-hmm. All of that will be part of what we're planning for. We also are working with staff to understand what information and what resources and professional development our staff will need.
And one additional thing, obviously, coming into this year, it was a tough budget year. I don't know what the supplemental budget will allow, but if these children, a lot of them are learning English as a second language, maybe there's an opportunity to turn that around. I don't presume to know the native language of a lot of these kids, but it might be nice to introduce that language to our children and kind of maybe allow for an outlet of a second language not immersion, but maybe just even
Yeah.
the dusting of.
I know that a lot of our teachers, and when some of our staff come at our next meeting to share, do leverage opportunities to help students learn, because we always want students to learn about the other kids in their class and get to know students as people, and to celebrate the heritage and the background and experience the student brings. So in a lot of cases when we have had students, the information about traditions and information about language is integrated within the context of the classroom.
I
Vicky,
have
I
heard
don't know
from-
if you want to, you look like you're getting ready to say
no,
something.
sorry.
so
I know I had just
feel
heard
free
from
to
the
jump in.
community after a couple
Yeah.
years that like we'd love to have, you know, a
Foreign language
foreign
program,
language
yeah.
program, and this might be, I don't know what the budget will allow, but a good opportunity to do something like that. Just
I
a
had a couple
thought.
questions.
Just go for it.
A couple more. No, thank you for taking all our questions and taking this
course.
time. I think a lot of people want to hear this and appreciate you doing this. You have done a great deal of work in 11 days, and it shows. So it's appreciated, and we know that a lot of these decisions are not in your control, and that regardless of how we feel about it, we have to stick to the mission statement when it comes to the kids in the building. And I feel like you're really trying to do that, so it's appreciated. Has the state been willing to, or talk about basing who they're sending based on availability? Like, if the first wave of kids came through and we said, look, we are out of space in 4th grade, we have some room in 2nd grade, are they willing to work with you and collaborate with you on that at all?
So I don't have all the information. So as I said, and information's coming. My understanding right now is there is a critical need. There's a lot of, we've exceeded the state capacity. So the initial students that are going to be placed is going to be based on need. I have talked to the liaison at DESE. I have shared our concerns. She has communicated that to the state, but how we manage capacity as we go forward is we're still in discussions over. So I don't believe that we are going to be able to say, you know, this is where we have spaces, but I do believe that we will work closely with the state around what we are able to do and what we aren't, and where they can step in and support.
For HOD, again, I know that's the big concern. Are we close to like legal capacity limits?
So this is an interesting question. So legal capacity would be like the maximum occupancy. It is way higher than what we would think is an appropriate class size. The legal maximum occupancy for just a standard classroom, and the HOD classrooms are bigger than Freeman, is like 35 to 38 students. We would never place that many students in a classroom, so we are not at the threshold of legal maximum occupancy. Where we are close in some places is to a maximum class size policy.
Okay, and so there's been questions, some of these questions I'm asking are not mine, but just ones I've heard. People were asking about, are you considering modulars or trailers or anything of that nature?
So not at this time. I think we, as I said, we have one space at least in each building for a transitional classroom. If we have to identify a second space, my priority would be to think flexibly about what we have available. You know, we are in the process of a building expansion study. There's certainly a lot of challenges to modular settings. I don't think that we, if we can creatively use the space that we have, I don't think there's a lot of people who want their child in a modular, especially if we're bringing in one or two. So I think our first priority would be to really look carefully at flexibly using spaces. We don't have a great deal of flexibility. We would be looking at relocating offices, repurposing common spaces, or a team meeting room. It would be really difficult, but I think that, again, this is intended as short-term. None of those are good long-term solutions. During COVID, when we had to relocate people, they were not great long-term solutions. But I think it would be better to relocate things temporarily and keep students within the footprint of the building.
Do you know if this will impact our federal funding at all? Because we weren't, we didn't qualify for it this year and lost the Title I. Does this change things at all?
So that's an interesting question, and I'll have to get further information. So Title I allocations are a year out. Whether if these students are registered and counted as low income, I think it could generate more additional funding next year. That's a question for Miriam, our business consultant, who's nodding and can probably speak to it more than I can.
So I would say if they're still in the district on October 1, they would be included in the count for the following year for a Title I allocation, assuming we have the population to support the grant in the beginning. So if they're there on October 1, there would be an allocation, even if they
Don't
leave the
remain.
district after that point. But they're counted on that day because that is the allocation date. So
Would that also impact Chapter 70 funding from enrollment count?
It would.
would impact Chapter 70 as well.
And again, we've talked about this, I don't know if we talked about it, I feel like I've talked about it a lot of people, but I don't know if we talked about it at this venue. So Chapter 70 funding is the state's mechanism for supporting towns and cities in meeting educational costs. It is a year delayed, so it is based on your count. And again, October 1's a critical date. That's when state uploads our student information, and all of the funding is based on that. So it doesn't keep up with growth. So we have actually, in some fiscal years when we've had a large growth in population from one year to the next, our per pupil from Chapter 70 has actually dropped down. It was less than the year prior because it doesn't account for growth. At the same time, if we have a situation like this where we have high growth in one year and the count, then we will have additional Chapter 70 revenue regardless of whether the students are enrolling, because there is a year lag in that calculation.
And then, let's see, you answered that. You answered a lot on this list.
I tried to.
I really do appreciate that. Do you foresee, you talked about there being a lot of supports at the shelter.
Yep.
But do you foresee hiring additional staff trained in trauma and trained in?
I do think that we will provide, so we have provided a lot of training for our staff in working with students with trauma. We have students throughout the district who have experienced traumatic experience, and having trauma-sensitive classrooms is a priority that we've had in place. So we have done a lot of training on that. I do think we will provide some refresher training for all staff, and I do think that we will be considering increasing some mental health staff to coordinate, to serve as family liaisons and coordination between the site. There will be a counselor and some services available at the site for families as well, but I think that we initially, increasing staffing to support a transition counselor that will be a liaison between the schools and the site will be important. And then as we evaluate emerging needs, if we need to make some additional adjustments, I'll be coming back to the committee and saying, because again, we are planning preliminarily. If we see there's a critical need here, or we have mostly students that have higher proficiency languages or higher language proficiency, and we're seeing gaps in academics, and we want to increase math and reading services. We're going to have to respond to the population that we are serving, and so it will be a little bit fluid. But I do think initially additional mental health staff will be helpful.
Okay. And then, I'm almost done. Like 2 more.
No, go ahead. I'd rather have everybody have their questions answered.
So when it comes to special education, if some of these kids come in and they have special education needs, the evaluation alone takes 45 days. So would you do like a handoff or?
So there's it takes 30 days to do an evaluation, and then districts have 45 days to hold a meeting to develop an IEP. What I would say, and again, some of this is based on information that I've gotten from other districts that have been accommodating and working with students from migrant families, this center is transient. If we are having significant numbers of newcomers that are just in the country and they are coming to us first, we are not going to start by doing a special education evaluation. These students have, it's referred to as SLIFE, have had significant disruptions to their educational programming. There is trauma involved in immigration, so it wouldn't be valid or reliable to rush right into a special education, and it wouldn't be good for kids. So if students are here 45 to 60 days, the likelihood of our district being involved in conducting that evaluation, we may be beginning an evaluation. I think it's probably not going to be for many students. There may be students housed in the shelter that are coming from other Mass public schools. If another district has completed an evaluation and students move, we may review those evaluation results, determine if we want to do additional testing, develop an IEP. It is a small number of students. Plainville has a little bit of a different structure. They're serving students that are, it's not a temporary shelter, they're in hotels. They have 30 students this year, I think she said 2 to 3
So like
receiving
2 to 3,
any kind of services.
But so I guess my question is, if you're in the middle of like an eval,
Yes.
all that time is not wasted. You'd be able to take that, hand it to the next district, and they'd be able to continue it on.
So they could continue the process.
Okay.
They wouldn't repeat testing.
Right, but
And
they
if,
could.
I
Okay.
think we would complete the testing. And then they would have to interpret the results and develop an IEP. So you could share evaluations that were completed.
Okay, perfect. Just the sharing would be
Yep.
great
Yep.
For these kids. Okay, the last thing, I guess not really a question, but maybe something we can all think about, because I don't know about you all, but I've been getting lots of emails and questions, and I would love to say more than, I'll call Ingrid, I'll let Ingrid know, but so just some way to just think strategically and thoughtfully about when people come to us, what is our role, how do we best communicate, how do we best get like a line of communication from you when you learn new things, because these meetings are once a month, so I don't even have the answer.
I think I'm glad you brought it up, because I think whenever a district is experiencing a major change, and this is a major change, this is new, people have valid questions and concerns, communication is really important. So we chose to send a letter out Friday because we got information Thursday. So we're trying to get it out as quickly as possible without confusing or bombarding people. So I think we are really committed to trying to keep the public updated as we learn more, whether it's, and we did that throughout all of COVID. We did weekly letters through the newsletter instead of monthly to make sure people were aware. We are in the process of planning a community forum and scheduling that, and that would be more of a dialogue and back and forth with the public. And we want to include the town and the King Philip schools as well. So that'll be coming up probably sometime in the first week of June when we have a little bit more information. But I do think throughout I will be sending regular communications out to the public as we know significantly more. And we also throughout COVID had virtual drop-in meetings, question and answer sessions. So I do anticipate we'll be developing a communication plan, and frequency of communication is important. I do always say if anybody in the public has a question, we will always call back. We will always set up time to answer your individual questions, but common information that we want to make sure everybody has will be regularly communicated out.
Thank you for all your work on this.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Just because of the fluctuating class sizes that might be happening, can we come up with some sort of like communication with the parents so that they know if like their child's class size has gone from 20 to 22 or 23? Just because I think from a parent standpoint I'd like to know if like there's more kids based so that I can do kind of maybe more support with my child at home, knowing that
Yep, and again, we will be looking carefully at how we're supporting those classrooms. We are looking at planning to start the year because we know we'll have some new students with some classrooms that'll have a lower number and allow us to bring more students in so that we balance that. But I do think anytime a new student's added to a class, teachers generally send, we'd like to welcome and let you know we have a new student. So parents will have that communication, and how we do that I'll certainly talk with the teachers about, and that'll be part of our plan. But in my experience, anytime a new student enters a classroom, we want to introduce that student to the students and parents.
I didn't know if they like wanted to, I don't want to single like a kid out and be like, everybody know that they're
We
new, but
want
more
to
just like, hey,
welcome our
maybe there's
students.
2 more kids in your classroom, like maybe you can talk to your child about,
And I think
going
students,
to
when we
dynamic.
get just, I did as a teacher for a lot of years in a community that did have some transient population, kids get really excited. We have a new kid, so you will hear from your parents. We have a new kid in our classroom today. But I do think we'll talk about ways to make sure that we're communicating and keeping people informed. Miriam and Vicki, did you guys I've been talking a lot, but I want to make sure that there weren't other things that you wanted to share with the committee in the update or any other questions?
No, I think
No, I think you covered
you
quite a
covered
bit.
everything, yeah. I think like again, just stressing that we've had fluctuating classrooms before. We have students move in every summer. We've always had an increase, and I think our with the amount of training that our teachers receive and just the resources that we have, because we have such a supportive, school committee too has always, and our community, that I think that we're well prepared, and like I said, we should be able to welcome the students, and again, if there's any questions around curriculum that you have, like please email, we'll be happy to discuss, and the nice thing about our current programming, and thank you again for the ELA adoption, very excited, that these programs really come with a lot of resources for teachers to be able to meet the needs of different students, including our multilingual learners. So that has been a big push from the state also, so we have a lot of resources in hand as well.
And just because I have heard the question, and I have a feeling you're going to ask it, no, it will not affect the district's adoption of the new ELA program. It will not take away funding from that. We are, we're going to vote on that in a little while, but it will not compromise that program. We have, the committee voted to approve the new curriculum. We are in the process of moving that forward. And additional revenue from the state may allow us to buy some supplemental resources to support the unique needs of some of our students, but it will not compromise the new adoption.
Any sense of timing of when you'll know exactly what our student population looks like and plan for actuality?
No. What I have heard from the state is that it's expected to open mid-June. They are going to scale up. It's not going to be fully at capacity initially, but they think it will get to full capacity very quickly. So over 3 to 4 weeks, we'll probably be at full capacity, which means by mid-July, we will know who the initial families are. So I would think by mid-July, I'll have an initial count. Some of those families will never arrive here. They may be exited to more permanent housing before the start of the school year, but we will have a good estimate. And again, as I said, I'll work closely with the budget committee and the school committee to make some original plans, then to think about how we may need to shift as more automation comes.
So you'll have about 4 to 6 weeks basically to be ready and operational on this.
Yep. And as big a challenge as that is, I do think we have just incredible teachers. Our teachers are committed and go above and beyond all the time. We have a strong administrative team that is committed to doing the best that we can with the information we have to develop the most robust plan we can. So we will be as prepared as we can be. And again, I think we have time where many others haven't. And we also have experience we can draw from other districts. So we will leverage all of that to make sure we are well prepared.
You guys ready to move on? Thank you. Again, lots of questions. You had
Again, we will be sending out information on a community forum so that we can have some back and forth dialogue. But in the interim, if there is something that is worrying you, something that you're concerned about, please reach out. I'm happy to talk to anybody or meet with anybody. Vicki would be as well, and we will let you know what we know, although we don't know all. So happy to have further conversation.
Just one more side comment. I wanted to thank you so much for doing this. I know there's a lot of trepidation in the community around what's happening. And you know, on a lot of different topics in a lot of different ways, on a lot of different levels. I think it's important to know that, you know, no one is sitting on information when it's being received, and if you do have questions, you should reach out to the district. This board, like all public bodies, can only communicate in public. We can only make decisions in public. So having a meeting scheduled the way that we do, we will not always be forward-facing into the community discussing these issues. Dr. Alardi has never turned down, I think, an inquiry about any topic, big or small, and is quick to try and provide information. If you are feeling uncomfortable about something, if you are feeling a sense of fear around this, just know that, you know, fear is not a fact. Fear is an emotion. So if you can address that by reaching out and inquiring about what it is that is causing your concern, you should 100% do that, because I'm not sure her phone is ever off. So.
Yeah, we're happy to answer any questions. And again, unfortunately, there's some things we don't know, and we'll tell you that. But we, as you said, we're really committed to trying to keep the community informed and responding to anybody who has questions. You want to move on?
Thank you.
Oh, it's me still. Sorry. Sorry. All right, next item. As the school committee knows, we adopted a new strategic plan several months ago, and we were in the process of bringing you action maps for each of the strategic objectives in that plan. And we tried to pace it so you're not reading 50 in one night, but there are 2 new ones to present. I'm going to just give a pause so people can gracefully exit and go home and take care of your children. Thanks for coming. So the strategic plan action maps that are in your packet tonight are around initiatives that we've started. One was to develop a peer leadership mentoring program for students to promote inclusion and integration. That initiative came out of direct feedback from families around supporting our students that are receiving substantially separate instruction and integrating better with the community. And so this is an action plan for supporting that program. You can see some of the action steps to establish a committee to develop the peer leadership program, to identify and train peer mentors, to identify shared experiences for students and peer leaders to engage in meaningful activities, look at the opportunity to partner with the United Schools program, which some people are familiar in the past has organized and coordinated events like the Special Olympics. They now have a unified schools program, so it's broader than just that event. To partner with them, to onboard them, our 2 schools as unified schools communities. We wanted to get feedback from parents, from parent leaders and participating students, as well as staff, as to how this model and this support program rolled out and what we could do to make it better, and then analyze feedback and develop further recommendations for the updating school year. So some of these things have started. We have had some great success. We had a meeting with the teachers that have been involved in that today. They've gotten great feedback from the community, as well as from students who have, from families of students who have, families of students who have participated. We are looking at participating in some of the Unified Schools activities and really looking at our field days to make them more universally accessible for all students. So this has been, you know, a work in progress. We are looking to, what we haven't done yet is to really do a formal survey so that we can think about what worked well and how we want to strengthen and improve this program moving forward. So that's the first action map, and then the other thing that you will see was one of the other action items in our strategic plan that the district has, and I really say Dr. Tupper has really worked closely with the Norfolk CPAC, and that was to expand the district disability awareness program. They've done a phenomenal job this year in renewing the iCare program, which is a literature-based discussion that we have parent volunteers that were trained to read core text, mentor text in classrooms and engage students in discussions about disability awareness. They also contracted with an outside group to present a program for students at specific grades. I believe it was 2nd and 5th grade, where they had a chance to have an immersion experience and learn about the specific disabilities and challenges people face and how they overcome them. I think that was a great success. The idea of picking select grade levels is that as students move forward, hopefully all of our students will have a chance to experience this kind of a program. We've also, I think Dr. Tupper has worked very closely with some partner organizations like the YMCA. There is new legislation and they had new grants available to offer free swim lessons for students on the autism spectrum and students with significant, students with disabilities. And so we have been able to move that forward and we have some students participating in that program. We have also had an adaptive communication consultant that has done some programming and some presentations to staff in order to help staff use assistive communication devices effectively with students in the school environment. We are also developing unified schools teams at each building to support planning efforts for unified sports and learning activities again throughout the whole school year. We're focusing on field days at this time, but expanding that to other events and activities throughout the school year. So you can see some of these things are in progress, some of these things are things that we are have completed, but that is sort of the plan for how we are targeting and addressing that initial goal. So happy to take questions. If anybody has questions.
Yeah, more of just for my understanding of how this works, having been involved in some strategic planning in the corporate world. So 2023 to 2027, right? This is awesome, by the way, but so it's 2024 and we're looking on this particular one, like there's 2 I's and everything else is C.
So these, all we're bringing forward to the school committee is phase 1 action.
Okay.
So there's 3 phases in our strategic plan, and we're just looking at phase 1 yet. Okay. It's not aligned as like a 1-year plan because some of these strategic goals might go 18 months, some are a year, but you're approving the action plans for phase 1 items only. Okay. And we will bring in phase 2 as we get prepared to launch that.
Thank you. I was trying to visualize a larger document and I was...
No, we don't want to be done with all of our goals in year 1. Yeah. So unless there's questions, we're just, we can move on to the next item. All good? All right. Vicki, do you want to talk about the inter-reading contract?
Sure, absolutely. So One thing I want to note that, as you can see, there's a letter of agreement that the Houghton Mifflin Harcourt provided for us. They are the publishers of Into Reading and Into Literature. One thing to note in the letter that it does say Into Literature 6 to 12. I asked them about it. They just said that whenever they procure a quote, whatever the last change they made, that's what pops up on their system. So it's Into Reading and Into Literature. I just wanted to be clear because it says into
I saw it and I was like, huh?
Right. So it's basically, we're adopting Into Reading, as we stated before, which is for our grade levels K through 5, and Into Literature is their middle school program, which complements the elementary level program called Into Literature, which is available for grades 6 to 12, but we're only doing it for grade 6. And what they were able to provide for us is to be able to help with the cost, and Miriam, please jump in if there's anything, into 2 different fiscal years, which the first one would be paid by July 15th.
Yes.
Right, $146,496,000, and then the second one, the remaining balance would be paid the following year, which is July 15th of 2025, of a little over $97,000. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I would add that the committee approved a budget with $125,000 in it. The state has not gone through their final budget process yet, but as it looks right now, the per pupil allocation for Chapter 70 is going up roughly a change of $74 per pupil, which would provide an additional roughly $76,000 to the town of Norfolk. I know that the superintendent and the town administrator have had conversations about that, and we anticipate that that money could very well come to support the schools. We would use that to further pay down this bill. So with that 125 plus the additional 76,000, you're looking at a roughly $43,000 remaining payment for the second year. Of course, as you heard the superintendent say earlier today, the budget has to be managed for all the changes that are happening. And this is one of those things that will also be managed. So if there's an opportunity for us to pay this off earlier, we absolutely would do that. If that doesn't happen, then we have an opportunity to pay it in the beginning of July in the next fiscal year. So this is coming to you just so that you are aware that this $97,000 bill is already encumbered, or an encumbrance for you to pay in your FY25 budget, FY26 budget.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So just to add to that, we met with the budget subcommittee. We had several options because we budgeted $125,000. We do have a budget freeze in place. If we have any end of year savings, it could be applied, but we have had some additional costs, so we won't know what we are looking at for potential additional revenue this year. We do have the Chapter 70 funding that would be hopefully available. We did have an open conversation at the select board meeting as well as with the town administrator. We also are contemplating and have had some conversations about bringing forward a capital request item to the fall town meeting. Curriculum adoption for all of these content areas is a significant one-time expense. And why I say one-time expense is we review our curriculum, core curriculum every 5 years. So when we make this purchase, this is for 5 years of material for ELA, and then we would be reviewing. And if we decide to go with the same program, it might be a minor adoption. If we change programs, we'll be looking at a new cost then. You can pursue town capital funding for one-time expenses that exceed, I think the threshold's 25,000, Miriam, or?
I think it varies by town, but yes.
So I think because we are potentially heading into another very difficult budget year, it might be wise for the committee to bring forward a capital request for curriculum adoption funding. Not just for ELA, but we will be reviewing the math curriculum this year, and we will need to make an adoption recommendation for math. So it may be wise to pursue a capital funding that would allow us to pay off the full balance of the ELA program this fiscal year and not carry the expense forward, as well as provide some seed money for the math curriculum adoption. Recognizing that this year we had to cut 5.4 positions to balance the budget. I think that might be a wise decision, and we'll discuss further. But again, worst case scenario, we did do a 3-year proposal. If we do a 3-year proposal, the cost of all the items goes up. It's like the more you buy, the less the cost. I think it's better, it's more financially sound to give yourselves the option of paying it over 2 years and get the lower price with the goal of paying it off this year through Chapter 70, budget freeze funding, operating budget allocations, and potentially a capital request. So, questions? Yeah.
Is it every year that a new curriculum is up for like readoption, or are these the 2 big ones that
These are the 2
we
big
can
ones.
expect? Okay.
We do have a curriculum review cycle that the school committee approved. We look
Yeah.
at every core content area once every 5 years.
But a lot of the time we keep
The 2
them?
biggest are math and ELA. In a different world, we would have potentially considered pushing off the math adoption, but the materials in the program we currently have is sunsetting and will not be available after this school year. So we have to do those 2 back to back.
So after those 2 years, we shouldn't be seeing like every year.
Well,
some
we'll
sort of-
have to,
I mean,
we'll review
potentially, but
science,
yeah.
we'll review social studies, as we've done before. So there will be curriculum adoption expenses, but the 2 biggest costs are ELA and math. Science would be the 3rd
Okay.
in terms of materials. Vicki, do you want to jump in or add anything?
No, just you can see the breakdown of the quote, if there's any questions by grade level. But that this really encompasses for the next 5 years, all the core materials that the classroom teachers will need, and the consumables will be replenished every year. So like once we make this purchase, like we have full ELA curriculum materials that we need for the next 5 years.
So we're looking for a vote on that, and you've already voted to approve the program. The reason we're looking for a vote to execute this contract is because it's split over 2 fiscal years. And we've approved this year's budget, but it will have an impact for next year's budget. Should everything go wrong and we can't fully pay this, we're making that commitment. So we're looking for a vote of the committee.
I have a motion to execute.
Can I ask
Oh,
you a
sorry.
quick question? The incremental Chapter 70 funding, that goes to the town?
It does.
And
It
then
goes to...
what's the process?
So that's a great question. So Chapter 70 funding for the regional middle school, because it's structured as a regional, goes directly to KP. Chapter 70 funding for the Norfolk Elementary goes to the town. And we have had a discussion, because the intent of the increase in the advocacy that's happened to increase Chapter 70 is to recognize the increasing costs that schools are facing for transportation, for inflation, for salaries, all of those things. So the intent of that money is to increase revenue to schools. We had a conversation at the select board, and at that meeting it was acknowledged that the intent of the town would be to return that money to the district. It would happen at fall town meeting. So there would have to be a vote of town meeting to transfer this money to the schools.
Okay.
Miriam, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it would have to be a vote at the town meeting that
Okay.
would appropriate additional funding from Chapter 70 or to the school department, but it has to go through town meeting.
For the sake of context, we have done this with the town in the past.
Yes.
Certainly during COVID, when we had fluctuating spring budgets, typically the same way that we did it, not that anyone would ever think the select board would not act in good faith, but in a public meeting discussing the fact that any additional funds would be returned to the schools if removed from the budget, and they have historically supported that with no pushback.
Can I get a motion to approve the contract as executed?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, sorry.
There's 2 informational items in your packet as well. We are members of the BICO Collaborative, which is the Bi-County Collaborative. Collaboratives in the state of Massachusetts are organized to provide unique specialized services to students who have special educational needs that can't be met within the schools. BICO is a collaborative that we are members of. Member districts receive reduced tuition rates for any students that we place through BICO, and it is part of the regulations that we provide the school committee as member districts with the annual operating budget. So in your packet, you'll see the budget. The budget for BICO is currently a balanced budget, which means that what we're projecting that we will bring in tuition and revenues balances the expenses. So you will see a copy of the budget. I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but this is really just a regulation that you are informed that the BICO budget is currently balanced. Questions? All right. You also, in your packet, have a update of the BICO quarterly report that just gives you a status of the enrollment in various programs at BICO, the percentage of students that are from member districts and from non-member districts. Non-member districts pay a higher tuition rate for accessing services and programs. We have, as the board, asked for detailed information on a regular basis about the number of referrals that they have received that they haven't been able to provide placements for, because that helps us with our planning, understand what needs we may have to really think creatively about meeting in different ways. So that's just the BICO quarterly report. Again,
Can I ask a quick question? Just,
yeah.
how many districts send students to BICO, member and non-member? How
Quite
many
a few.
communities are pulling
I don't.
from?
I'd have to get that number, but
okay.
quite a few. The collaborative programs are primarily, or many of their programs are housed in public schools.
Yep.
So there's programs in Plainville, there's programs in Rentham, there's programs in Foxborough. I believe, and I have to verify, I think we have 17 member districts currently.
Right, I knew there were a lot of members, but how
Yes.
many? I didn't realize.
And
the
non-members,
non-member.
yes, we have probably. I don't want to put a guess out, but more
Offline, I'm
than
just
I would say
interested.
more than 10 or 15 other communities send students to BICO. They have excellent
Yeah.
programs, and sometimes while they pay a higher rate, it's a lower rate than private placements and high quality programming. So,
Thank you.
anything more, Mary Mara?
Nope, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's 17 member communities and lots of non-members.
Yeah. Great. So on the BICO theme, annually the school committee has to appoint someone to serve as a member of the BICO board. The board of directors for BICO meets currently monthly on Thursdays at 9 a.m. Currently the board is all the board of directors members are currently superintendents and have been through the period of time that I've been part of BICO, but you can appoint a school committee member to serve as the BICO rep. Generally, it's been superintendents because we're talking about the programs and district needs. I'm happy to serve. I've been the chair of the BICO board for a number of years, so I'm happy to continue to serve if you would like me to remain on the BICO board. If somebody would like to attend those Thursday morning meetings in my stead, I'm happy to support somebody in doing that.
Can I get a motion to appoint Dr. Alardi to the BICO board?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great group.
All those in favor?
Aye. The next thing in your packet, so one of the responsibilities of school committees is to annually appoint a school physician and our school nurses. And that's directly from the statute. I believe we've given you the statute language in there so that you are aware of it. It is my recommendation, I'm required to bring you a recommendation. It is my recommendation that we retain the current nursing staff. They've done an outstanding job. We have Julia LeBoy at the Freeman Kennedy. There's just a little bit of background. She came with significant clinical experience, has worked at Mass General Hospital, as well as a number of other Boston Hospitals, Brigham and Women's, Beth Israel Faulkner. She's been a great addition to the FK staff, so I would recommend we reappoint her. We also have Kathy Steck, who is a .6 nurse currently at the HL Day School. She's a certified nurse. She also had a strong clinical background. We originally hired her last year as under a DESE emergency license, so she had her nursing license but was in the process of finalizing her DESE license. She had an emergency license. She has since completed that, so she also has her DESE license. Again, did a great job. Currently, she job shares that position with Ann Hurley, who has been our lead school nurse for many, many years at HL Day. Ms. Steck is interested in remaining in a part-time position, and Ann Hurley has agreed to continue as a point for 2 days a week. So I would recommend the school committee appoint all of the current nurses to another one-year contract. The school committee has already voted to approve a COLA based on, through the budget process. That's a 2% COLA for all non-union staff. Happy to take questions.
We do them all in one? Can we put a motion, or each?
I think I would appoint them individually,
Okay.
probably.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
So last year at this meeting, we were talking about when Ms. Steck gets her official license, then it would be the intent for her to take over and could
We
retire.
had hoped that, but I think they would prefer to remain in part-time positions for one more year.
Okay, I just want to, and does she hope to continue that further than 1 year, or?
At this point, because their contracts are only a single year, I haven't had further discussions.
Okay, I'm just wondering if Mrs. Hurley decides that she'd like to go up to her house in Maine.
Like she meant it when she tried to retire 2 years ago.
Yeah, I do not know what Ms. Steck's long-term intent would be, but, you know, in a future contract year, if Ms. Harley decided she was ready to retire, we could negotiate either filling that position
Right.
for and having a job share, or working with Kathy around.
Okay, I know we just discussed the intent.
Yeah.
It was different, and then when I saw this, I was like, huh.
I think it's a great partnership, and I think they work really well together, and I think there is, you know, there's a lot of learning from working with an experienced staff member, and they both bring very different backgrounds. So I think it's working, and they'd like to try to continue for one more year.
Great.
All right, so we'll do multiple votes, I guess.
I think it's 2 separate contracts, right?
It's 3 separate. Motion to appoint Julia Lavoie to the Freeman Kennedy as the Freeman Kennedy nurse. A motion to appoint Kathy Steck to a .6 position, and then the .4.
So looking for a motion to reappoint Julia Lavoie for the full-time position at the Freeman Kennedy School.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Looking for a motion to reappoint Mrs. Kathy Steck to a .6 position at the H. Olive Day School.
So moved.
Second, or is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And looking to reappoint Mrs. Hurley as a .4 nurse at the H. Olive Day School.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I know, I'm going to feel like I'm missed second today.
Next one is the school committee also is required to appoint the school physician. In your packet, you have a description of the school physician's job. We have worked with Dr. D'Angelo for a number of years. The nurses have found him very responsive to any questions. He supports us in, if we have a student with unique medical needs, developing an individual healthcare plan, reviewing those plans. If there is any kind of concern about medical treatment, the nurses would regularly consult with Dr. D'Angelo. Again, they have expertise, and they have had a positive working relationship. So it would be my recommendation that we appoint Dr. D'Angelo. The annual stipend for that position is budgeted, and it is $2,000. He has not increased that recently. So.
Looking for a motion to reappoint Dr. D'Angelo as the school physician.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If it's okay, I'll take the next one out of order. We do want to have a school committee calendar discussion just to discuss if you want to continue to meet on Tuesdays, but there is one more action item. So I think we should maybe skip and do the bus contract next, if that's okay.
Makes sense.
So for the past several months, we have been working, Miriam, do you want to speak to this?
Sure.
My voice, I'm tired of my own voice, so please.
So we've worked with our neighboring districts of Plainville, Rentham, NKP to come up with a bid specification to go out to bid for Big Yellow Bus transportation services for all of our students. There were specifications put out in each district, and each district received their own bid documents and bid responses. We received one response from Holmes Bus Company, no surprise. And so we are recommending at this point a 3-year contract with Holmes. The language in the contract does allow for 2 additional 1-year renewals at the school committee's option, the town option. At this point, we are looking at a rate of $265 per bus per day for next year, $275 for the following year, and $285 for FY27. Total cost for the 3-year contract would be $2.1 million, $2,118,000, with as written. It is not uncommon for districts to waive the annual performance bond for vendors who have been in the district for a long time. And we know that they're not going anywhere, and we know that they are members of this community. So that may be a recommendation as well for a 3-year contract at $2,079,000, and it would be a savings of the roughly $18,000, roughly 12 to 14, $39,000. Sorry, $39,000. Reading the wrong line. So that would be the recommendation from the superintendent. Not to put words in her mouth, but my recommendation to her, to you, would be to award a 3-year contract to Holmes.
We get a motion, then we'll discuss. Is that?
So moved. Oh, sorry.
Okay, I got a motion to award the 3-year school bus transportation services contract.
So moved. I just really wanted my first. Second.
Ladora's been so quick on it.
All those in, oh no, wait, any discussion? Have you talked to Holmes about the possible need for buses?
Not yet, but they do quote in the bid specs the price for additional busing.
Okay.
So we would work with them around that.
Okay. Any other questions?
The performance bond, is that a separate, we're not waiving that now, we're waiving that potentially in the future, or how does
So
that?
the recommendation would be that we waive their requirement to issue a performance bond, which they would have to do through their insurer, and it comes at a significant cost to them. If we waive that, they're passing the savings on to us. So it is our recommendation that we waive the performance bond because they are local. They have been the only bidder and provided transportation service to us throughout the 13 years. So we're recommending you vote to waive the performance bond and approve the 3-year contract with a total value of $2,079,000.
Yes. Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye. Okay. Then the last discussion item was whether meeting nights. So historically, we've met on the second Tuesday of every month, and we will prepare a calendar of anticipated meeting dates. We always have to flex the May meeting around town meeting because we can't meet prior to the election results being certified because we have to reorganize. So we do flex that meeting date. But I didn't know if anybody was opposed to continuing the meetings being on Tuesday nights, or if you want us to prepare that draft based on that model that we've had in the past.
Tuesdays are good.
Tuesdays are fine, please.
Sure. That works?
Tuesdays, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll bring the draft projected meeting calendar then to vote on at the next school committee meeting. And finally, that is all I have for tonight. We do have some subcommittee reports, but I'll turn that back to you, Lisa.
Okay, time for committee reports, and happy to hear from the Norfolk Building Subcommittee.
It's actually a full committee. It's not a subcommittee. I misspoke earlier when I called it a subcommittee.
We posted it as a subcommittee, but it is a town-appointed committee. You're correct. I apologize. We'll fix that going forward.
Yeah, I'd happily give an update, and some of this is probably redundant because we just gave an update at town meeting. But we are in the process currently of, actually we completed, I think, vetting the modular options. There's currently 3 options we're looking at. A 2-story modular option that would attach, not physically, but the back, so where the actual brick and mortar building was proposed, right about there. Then there's an L-shaped one that would be further back, and then there is that's 2 stories, and then there's a 1-story option that would be in the green space over here where the Gaga pit is. For each of those options, just as a building goes, we have gone through with AI3 and reorganized what the spaces would be. So currently, just given the fact that children are going to have to leave the building and go into a new building, it was determined by the committee that it makes more sense to house a full grade level there rather than having children that are in this building go to the modular for specials, whatever special. Yes,
We had art,
was
the
there,
science lab, and the
yeah.
makerspace in there in the original design.
So because of that, we had to do some moving around. But miraculously, square footage all stayed the same. So we, yesterday, told AI3 that they can go out to start pricing those options. They're also going to price the brick and mortar again because that's old at this point. The bid is about 15 months old. So what we will be getting back on the 18th?
June 18th.
June 18th. Oh, yeah. That's the next 18th.
That's right.
Is prices on what each modular option will cost us. And we'll get 2 quotes for each option, so there's going to be a lot of quotes. One is a higher level of building material, and one is a more middle of the road building material, which will impact longevity and just efficiency, all that stuff. So we are getting there. So that will be the next step, is to look at that, and this is all just cost, and then we will have to layer in how it's going to impact education. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, we're going to have children potentially, if we go, out to the green space out here, they're going to have to walk approximately 300 plus feet from one building to another. It's not enclosed. How do we manage that? And that's going to take away from educational time, especially if you have children who have needs outside the classroom. So all of that stuff will come next, and the committee will figure out some pros and cons and decide if there's any other viable solutions that we should be exploring. And then the outcome of all of that will be, we will make a recommendation. We are looking at some town forums. I think, Ingrid, you shared with me that you're working already with River's Edge and some others, so maybe we can...
Not yet. What we, so our process got shifted a little bit because we had originally brought forward the brick and mortar solution.
Yep.
And we had at that time talked about having some community forums. We had 2 already. We had a 3rd one scheduled, and the intent was potentially to do a separate presentation at River's Edge. And because we had some people that had questions, and we wanted to make sure that we were getting the information out. And we had a couple of individuals who attended many of the forums who offered to help coordinate a time. But we shifted gears, and now we've gone back to the drawing board, and we're looking at modulars. I expect once we have a final recommendation that we'll do the same thing, have multiple community forums, multiple opportunities for the public to review designs, review recommendations, weigh in, and I would certainly try to reach out to those populations who, because obviously any kind of building project is going to impact tax revenue, and we want to make sure everybody understands what the options are and why we're recommending a specific plan. So the more we can get out and get information to different venues, we would be trying to do that.
So cart before the horse a little bit, but we will be trying to get out to the public in various ways once we have an update.
So I lost the recommendation. So next, on the 18th, you'll have a recommendation or not?
No, so
yet?
on the 18th, we are going to, as a building committee, get from AI3 the estimates.
Okay.
Yep,
So,
of all the different.
So at that point, we'll be able to say, okay, like this just does not make sense from a fiscal perspective. We can cross that off, or we'll have a better, and then we'll have to take into account how it's going to impact education. And so we still have quite a road ahead, but we're making good progress.
Then do you know of a general timeline of when you think you'll have a recommendation, or too far out right now?
I don't know. It's hard with the summer, I think. So we're going to have to figure out how we haven't discussed as a committee how we're going to continue to move forward after the school year. I mean, our next meeting is like literally the day after school ends. So we still have to work that out. I don't know.
And I think the timeline will be impacted by whether or not the committee decides there's potential other options that they want to fully explore and vet. In the original study that we did way back in 2017, we had considered would a 3rd site possibly be a viable option? Would it be feasible to build an early childhood center, relocate the preschool? At that time, that option was ruled out because we have a space crisis or a space challenge in both buildings, and that only addresses the space needs in one, and would leave us with a shortage at the other building. But I think, given the context, we want to go back and say, is that still the conclusion of the building committee? This is still not. Unfortunately, with the 3rd site, and this is probably more than we want to get into tonight, but we could not move preschool and kindergarten or something like that because it wouldn't have art, gym, special education. So that's sort of why that was ruled out originally. We couldn't move 2 grades and then move students down. But I think the committee wants to do their due diligence, and we'll have to discuss, are there other viable things? If there is something identified that the committee as a whole feels this is worthy of further exploration before we feel comfortable coming forward with a recommendation, then that's going to extend the timeline.
Yeah, and I will just add, because it's important to note for the public, and I think for the committee who might not know, our committee is myself, Medora, Ingrid, but then there's also 3 members of the community, and Justin Casanova Davis, but like not just
Yes, 3 members of the committee that were appointed by the select board.
So they're coming from a completely different perspective. Some of them, are asking questions that have been asked before, but they're really doing a good job kicking the tires on all of these things, and I wouldn't be surprised if they want to have that discussion, which, quite frankly, is helpful for us and for the community to feel like we're actually vetting every option. So I think, which we are, but, it's very vocal, which is good.
That's great. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to new items. Looks like policy has some minutes.
Just one point of clarification. We had an issue that the revised agenda that included number 4, the budget subcommittee, that was for vote, but that was not on the posted agenda, so we're going to delay the vote on those. Okay. So the first 3 we would vote on. And we'll bring the second set of budget minutes to the new committee because it wasn't posted as a vote.
So for policy subcommittee, I'm assuming, I reviewed these. Did you have an opportunity to review them?
I had to remember when the meeting was.
I'm sorry, we didn't list policy subcommittee because we were restructuring, but we certainly can let the policy committee know where we left off if it's up to them.
There's not a significant update to provide, just from the standpoint of the minutes. I think the minutes are fine.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, I thought you were giving a committee update. You're talking about the new items.
I'm talking about G1.
Yes, all right, perfect, thank you. So just for clarification too, because we changed the policy subcommittee, these minutes can come in the whole committee, even though you weren't attending the policy, can vote to approve the minutes per the recommendation of the policy committee. Because they're not a standing committee anymore to vote on them separately. Does that make
even
sense?
though they're the same.
Yep, so that's why Midori is filling you in on that they agree with the content of the votes.
I would recommend accepting these.
Can I get a motion to approve the policy minutes?
So moved. I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And then we have a set of school committee minutes from April 9th. Everyone's had a chance to read it. Can I get a motion to approve the school committee minutes on April 9th?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And then the next set of minutes is from our joint meeting with the select board. And that was on April 23rd. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then we're skipping the budget subcommittee minutes. And our next school committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 11th. Does anyone have any issues with that? And I have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.